Complaints of the previous generation of hardware have been vastly improved upon. The collective mind of the gaming community drives the evolution of the hardware, and this is why the console wars, the debate, exists. People like Mark Cerny at Sony and the team at Xbox listen. In this round, we're going to be comparing the devices in terms of aesthetics, overall hardware design, heat output, power consumption, and silent performance. So welcome back to the next installment of the console wars. The expectations for game console design and aesthetics have been upped quite a bit in the past couple of decades, from Atari's 80s wood paneling to somewhat toyish pieces of plastic. Game console design has always been interesting. At its worst, it's been butt ugly, but at its finest, it's been truly elegant. The words that come to mind when describing the PS4 in this regard are compact and streamlined. First impressions are key when it comes to aesthetics, and the PS4 impresses with its sleek and slanted design and surprisingly compact form factor. Aesthetics are of course completely subjective, but when you see the Xbox One for the first time, it's hard not to wonder where this goes. And there's no question about it, the Xbox One is significantly larger than the PS4, and the power supply is a sight to behold. But there's been enough jokes about the Xbox 360's power supply, so I won't go there. But before you jump into any conclusions, is big and bulky always a bad thing? There is a reason why PC gamers tend to enjoy big cases, and one of the key reasons behind this is airflow. The better the airflow, the cooler the components are, and the cooler that the components are, the longer they will last. It's no secret that the Xbox 360 suffered severely from overheating, and it's actually pretty great to see Microsoft taking measures to ensure that this gen isn't a repeat of that debacle. The Xbox One is outfitted with a quite substantial heatsink and fan that even a representative of the PC master race can appreciate. The heatsink and fan are mounted on the Xbox One's main system on chip, and the fan is pushing air out of the top end of the Xbox One. The device has substantial air intake vents on the sides and the back, so basically air comes in through the sides and back, and the large fan pushes the heated air out of the top, so the Xbox One has decent airflow. The PS4 is simply put a small engineering marvel when you look at how much Sony has managed to cram into a relatively small space. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to determine which of the two companies has a long history in hardware engineering. From a custom Blu-ray drive to the PS4's compact power supply, everything has been designed to accommodate the PS4's sleek form factor. But when the devices are packed with the latest hardware at a relatively low price point, it comes as no surprise that a couple of concessions has had to be made. For one, the frame of the PS4 isn't quite in perfect balance. It teeters a bit when laid on an even surface. It is a bit disconcerting, but a quick fix no doubt in later revisions. The PS4 can be placed upright, but according to Microsoft, the Xbox One cannot. This is due to the choice of disk drive, which is not designed to function vertically. The cases of both devices are made from a mix of matte and glossy plastic, the latter of which is extremely prone to scratches. A rougher microfiber cloth will leave its mark on both. I learned this after a couple of wipes, so I recommend you heed my warning. But you obviously can't get it all at this price point. I'd actually pay an extra $100 for a metal frame, but I guess that's what PCs are for. While the PS4 is quite extravagantly vented in the back to maximize airflow, the small size of the case obviously limits the size of the heatsink and fan, which are significantly smaller to that of the competition. The PS4 pulls air from the vents on the sides, and the fan pushes the hot air out of the back. But let's take a closer look at how both consoles perform in practice when it comes to heat and noise output. We'll be going deeper into the CPU, GPU, and other components in a later round, but at this stage it's relevant to say that both systems run on a similar system on chip with approximately comparable architecture and power values. After extensive measuring, the PS4 was idling consistently around 38 degrees Celsius or 100 degrees Fahrenheit, which is a respectable result, but the Xbox One's temps impressed me even more. With an idle temp of 33 degrees Celsius or 94 Fahrenheit, the Xbox One manages to run a bit cooler than the PS4 when idling in the user interface and not doing much. But what about load temps while gaming? I was surprised to see some other tech sites getting opposite results of what I measured. While I was easily able to heat up the PS4's exhaust temps to about 50 degrees Celsius, 122 degrees Fahrenheit, I could not push the Xbox One's temps above 47 degrees Celsius. No matter what I threw at it, I played Titanfall while running Netflix in the background, I tried Forza and Dead Rising with different apps in the web browser in the background, I could not get the temps to rise beyond that point. So simply put, the Xbox One, at least in my case, runs cooler than the PS4. And these results are actually consistent with the two other measurements. Firstly, power draw. While idling in the menus, the Xbox One draws about 65 watts of power, and the PS4 draws about 80 watts at idle. And after a couple of hours of intensive gaming, the Xbox One draws about 20 watts less than the PS4. To sum up, the PS4 is more power hungry, and it has a smaller fan, so when you put 2 and 2 together, you get a higher heat output for the PS4. And next up is noise output. Do you hear that? The Xbox One is practically silent when idling. The PS4 doesn't cause much of a ruckus either. But the noise output on the Xbox One is 1 or 2 decibels lower than the PS4. And here's where the Xbox One's size may again come into play. While the PS4's fan ramps up with a 10 decibel noise increase during intense gaming, the Xbox One's large fan managed to keep quiet even after an extensive gaming session, and even while Netflix is running in the background. And that is an impressive achievement. There's barely a difference to the idle noise test. But it should be noted that the Xbox One has 2 additional sources of noise, namely the Kinect and power supply. Both seem to have a fan inside them. Thankfully, the noise from the Kinect is not audible from an average viewing/listening distance. But probably the most annoying thing that needs to be mentioned here is that the external power supply is not completely silent. It creates a slightly higher pitched squeal that definitely is audible when the machine is on standby mode. And speaking of standby mode, both machines are capable of downloading updates and doing some secondary tasks in standby mode. The PS4 draws about 9 watts of power, while the Xbox One actually draws more than double at around 19 watts. Sure, 19 watts is not a massive power draw, but the Xbox One will run your utilities bill around $10 more than the PS4 annually. The weird thing about the Xbox One standby power draw is that it fluctuates and seemingly reacts to the Kinect. So I have a feeling that the ever-seeing eye could always be watching. I see. There are a couple of distinct practical design choices that separate the hardware. Sony has insisted to put the 2 USB slots in the front. Yes, they are easy to access, but the cramped procession prevents you from using more robust USB solutions like a 64GB super-fast Kingston. Also, if you use accessories like a Astro Gaming or Turtle Beach headset that require you to plug in via USB, you will have to run the wire across the otherwise clean-looking face of the PS4. Microsoft took a very simple approach: 2 USB ports in the back and 1 easy access port on the side. I find this a much better solution, and it doesn't spoil the look of the device. The power buttons and indicator lights on both machines are subtle yet elegant. I enjoy both immensely, but I hate the PS4's power-up sound. It's the same as on the PS3, and it reminds me of the countless times I've accidentally powered on the device by sitting on the DualShock 3 or Bluetooth remote. There's not much to say on the input and outputs. They're pretty much the same on both devices, excluding the 2 USB ports and the much-touted HDMI input on the Xbox One. This, of course, allows you to hook up a DVR or cable box or other device into the Xbox One. The Xbox One also has an IR extender output. There's one key design choice, however, in the PS4 with which the Xbox One cannot compete with, namely this. The PS4's hard drive has been designed to be easily accessible, and it took me about 10 minutes to swap in an SSD. This is not possible with the Xbox One without tearing down the device and voiding the warranty. So there it is. Both devices look very clean when hooked up and installed, but the streamlined PS4 definitely wins in the looks department and is undoubtedly a marvel of hardware engineering. However, the compact size of the PS4 comes with its weaknesses, as the Xbox One takes the cake in both silence and heat performance. And from a practical standpoint, the Xbox One has a slight edge with the USB placement, but the PS4 receives a golden star for hard drive accessibility. And for all these reasons combined, the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One deserve a point in round 2. Round 3 is up next, and this is where it gets interesting. We'll be taking an in-depth look at the CPUs and GPUs of both systems, so stay tuned for the next installment of the Console Wars.
What's up, everyone? Thank you for watching that video. If you want to see more of the latest and greatest tech news, you can subscribe to our main Techno Buffalo channel by clicking the button right down below in my pants region, or click on the buttons to your right to see more videos.